Hi, you're coming live to the Get Busy Livin Podcast, and we have the lovely Melinda Richards today. And I'm Dr. Scott. I'm from the Healthy Habits Club, and we worry about your mindset, your nutrition, and your supplementation. But we are coming back to Melinda. Let's have a round of applause for Melinda. So thanks very much, Melinda, for coming today. Much appreciated. It's such short notice. You only found out last night, so thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, no, it's been great, and it's been great to meet you and talk to you. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Much appreciated. So I'm going to start off with the first question. So tell us, Melinda, what gets you out of bed every day?
Well, what gets me out of bed every day is that I have a great family and I have a wonderful life that I've built up over the years. And I suppose, lots of things that motivate me, lots of things that I have to get done, and lots of things that I'm doing to be a productive member of society and making a difference before I die. And all of those really philosophical questions really come to mind. That very first minute of the morning is, okay, right, there's stuff to do. Let's jump out of bed and get them done. But they're good things. And I think they're things that I believe in and things that I love to do. So
that's yeah. I align with you, Melinda, in that. Yeah, I believe that I'm here to help the community and try and help them as much as possible. And it sounds exactly what you just said is pretty much exactly the same thing, and that's fantastic. So much appreciated for your service to the community as well. So thank you so much.
You.
So
thank you.
I was going to say, so we'll I'll just jump into. So you've written a book, and
yes,
when did you write it?
I started writing it in 2018 and I finished it and launched it in 2023 last year. And I suppose that 5-year journey had a very big break in the middle of it in 2020 for obvious reasons. I really had to put pens down and recast. And my book is called You Can't Say That, The Demise of Free Thought in Australia. And it really started in 2018 for me because I could see this kind of wokeism and woke mind virus starting to infect our community to such an extent that it was starting to change our cultural value system in Australia, and it was starting to change the way people were behaving, and it was bringing forward identity politics and cancel culture and political correctness, and it was starting to take over. So I had these thoughts in 2018 and started penning down what I was really, really concerned about as an Australian. I'm a proud Australian. I love my country. And I started to become very concerned about the path that we were heading down. So a few words turned into some chapters. And then I decided then, okay, well, I think I've got enough here for a book.
But I totally agree with you. I sort of started a little bit earlier, but I didn't write a book. That was ahead, so I appreciate that. That's fantastic. In 1994, my mother passed away, and she died from a rare type of cancer. And the more questions I asked about from the surgeons,
yes,
it's typical story, huh? So then I realized that I wasn't going to get any answers from the doctors. So
yeah, that's
right. When I went on a quest to find the answers, because the mainstream medical system at the moment, it's got flaws. It's got a lot of flaws, and people are seeing it, and they're starting to understand. But it doesn't stop there, does it? Medicine is only the start. Medicine is only the start.
That's right. And I had the same journey with my mother in 2005. And when I started talking to her oncologist, it was very, very clear to me that the industry of cancer is a very, very big one. It needs to be nurtured and fed, just like all of the other very big industries and global industries we've got. Like the medical system is the same as the food system. It's the same as the military system. It's the same as the agricultural system. I mean, these big globalist systems are owned by the same people and they need to be fed. And they need to be fed through the soldiers of that system, which becomes the doctors and the medical communities and governments, and that has to be nurtured. And it's only when it hits you personally that you can really start to wake up and understand exactly what's going on. It was just that by 2018, I probably had started waking up a little bit more than what I was in 2005. So it was one thing after another. And it's always a series of little things that you don't notice until one day you turn around and all of a sudden we're talking about what is a woman. And we got to this point because we sat back and said nothing. And that's why I wrote the book, because it's really for everybody to go out there and go, we're actually all part of this society. We all have a voice. We all have an opinion. We all have personal stories, and we need to start speaking out more. And that's really the purpose of the book for me, is to say that it is about giving people the courage to speak out. Even if you think that it's not a popular opinion that you have, speak out anyway and be a part of the Great Awakening. Be a part of people that are sick and tired of seeing the same narrative and the same propaganda shoved down our throats.
Yeah, well, then that comes to the next when someone does, that someone's on to a pressing point when the media shut them down. That there's something going on here. There must be something else for them to suppress that information, because that's what they're doing. They're suppressing the information because they're shutting them down. That means that they must be touching someone's nerve. So
that is exactly right. Like I always say to people, always have a look at the people that are being censored, because they've got something important to say. So if someone's being shut down, then have a look and find out why they're being shut down. And usually that's definitely something that you should know, and it's something worth knowing.
Yeah, totally agree. I don't listen to the news anymore. I grew up, I was told the same thing, like everyone else. I was told to watch the mainstream media. But the more and more I learned, the more I realized that it's all controlling information. So you need to go outside of that.
That's
learn
right. That's exactly right. And I think we've got to encourage people to do that, because we are, in terms of, a lot of the things that you talk about, it links back to our health and well-being. If you feel suppressed, if you feel marginalized in society, if you feel like you don't have a voice anymore, if you feel like government is taking over your life by encroaching through rules and regulations and taxation, and this does affect your mental health. It does affect your spiritual health. And this is something that we never, ever draw the bow to. We don't talk about mental health in terms of, the government in Australia makes everything worse. And the government in Australia isn't responsible for all the things that they're interfering in. The government of Australia is actually contributing to the deterioration of our core values. And all of these things do contribute to the way that we feel about ourselves, the way we feel about our friends and our family and our society. We talk so much about all of the symptoms of what's going on, but the reality is we've got to get back to our core values for our own mental health and well-being as well.
Oh, you took the words right out of my mouth. So yeah, that's exactly right. As I said before, that we are bombarded with information, and the problem is the information that is mainstream bombardment is not in our benefit. And now that I understand where these core ideas are coming from these people that are pushing these ideas onto us, and
yes,
the hardest thing is to understand what their agenda is, understanding what they want to achieve. And at the end of the day, and the more and more I see, the more and more, just from experience, the more and more I'm seeing, it's just all about control. It's all about telling us what we need to do.
It is. It is about global control. And this has been something that has been talked about amongst those elites for quite some time. There is a plan in place. It took me a long time to get my head around what that plan is. But part of that plan has to be, to control people, you need two things. The first thing you need is fear. And the second thing you need to transfer wealth. So you need people dependent. So you need dependence and you need fear. Now, during the COVID debacle of that 2.5 year period, and I even hate saying the word, it's just such an integral part of our language now that it's horrible. But part of that was, first of all, testing the level of fear and how propaganda can propagate that fear, and understanding who's going to buy into that and who isn't. And it was remarkably easy to create fear. And the second thing they had to do is create wealth transfer. And you're going to do that by pulling money away from people who are entrepreneurs, from small to medium-sized businesses, and shift it into the banking system, governments, and back into the large corporates. And that's what happened over a 2.5 year period. And I think that they were very, very successful in doing that. I was beside myself that whole time because I was really pretty much aware of what was happening out of the gate. So for me, my mental health took a little bit of a kick in the head then, because I honestly could see exactly what was going on. But I was living in the twilight zone. There was certainly no way that I was getting through to a lot of people early on. But the interesting thing now, though, is that 2 years out of that, or less than 2 years now, actually, we're not even, less than 2 years later, after the mid 2022 finish of it, which is what I class July 22 is when it finished. It's almost like the opposite is happening now. There is a great awakening. And I think that out of that despair, that silver lining, and bringing people into the light, and the light is starting to grow. So I don't want to be Nancy negative about it, but that fear and that wealth transfer occurred. But now I think what's going to happen is that people power may be the thing to grab that back over the next 5 to 10 years. It will take some doing, but I can see that starting to happen. And I think that we do need to be positive about that. We do need to understand that the light is shining into the dark and illuminating what's really going on. And that illumination is the thing that's waking people up.
Yeah, I totally agree. People are starting to change. They're starting to talk more about communities and also communities within communities because of that reason. Because we are being suppressed, we are seeing it left, right, and centre. I'm in Brisbane, and our affordability here for real estate, for instance, is just ridiculous. It's risen 20. I go to many networking meetings, and I talk to a lot of real estate agents, and I'm being conservative here, and they're telling me it's like 26% increase, which has never ever happened in history. In a 2 year period, it's risen 26%. Now that's never ever happened. So, what's the outcome? Well, people just can't afford to buy, and the banks are making it harder to buy.
That's right, and the other outcome of that. So that's the driver of the outcome. Well, the thing is, people can't afford to buy, but there are actually outcomes of that. And I'm a homeowner. And it doesn't matter how much my house goes up. I'm living in it. I'm not going to sell it. I mean, it's my home. I mean, unless I sell it, where am I going to go? I mean, you're buying and selling in the same market. It's a ridiculous thing to say, oh, well, people are so happy because, their value's going up. But it's manufactured value. Houses aren't worth what they say they're worth. And because the 26% increase is manufactured, it's a ridiculous amount. And it's a bubble. And people have been talking about the housing bubble in Australia for decades. And I've seen a lot of doomsday discussions about the bubble bursting, but the government won't want that to happen because that will be a political disaster. But the outcome of people not affording to buy a home is that they then need to have a house. So they try to rent. And then the outcome of that is there's not enough rental properties. And the outcome of that is that you then have a group of people in one of the highest taxed nations in the world, where the bulk of people in Australia actually pulled down some kind of welfare or benefit from the government, not being able to put a roof over their head. So we've turned into this country where we want the government then to fix that problem. So they create the problem, and then we ask them to fix it. So we do ridiculous things like hand people cash and first-time homeowner grants, which just pushes the inflation rate up and pushes the price of houses up. So that's ridiculous. But you see, we look to the government all the time for answers, and every time they interfere in the market, it creates the further problem. So the housing crisis, like the youth crime crisis and like the healthcare crisis, I mean, you can talk about anything at the minute. The country is in the way we are because we ask, the collective we, not so much you and I, but we ask the government to fix a problem. And when they try to fix the problem, they make the problem worse. And we've been doing that for 30 or 40 years. And the result is that we now have homelessness. We have mental health crisis. We have a healthcare system that's collapsing around us. So you see, we could probably pick a subject like housing and we could debate it and talk about solutions. But at a higher level, at a strategic level, we've allowed the government to become our mummy and daddy. And mummy and daddy haven't been very good parents. So we're sitting in this country now that is one of the highest tax nations in the world. So we are handing government money to mismanage the country. That's what we're doing. And Australians need to wake up to that. And it's not just Australia. I know other Western nations such as Canada, New Zealand, the US and the UK are very much in the same boat. I've got a lot of people reaching out to me and telling me that. But for right now, you and I are sitting in Australia. Let's look at what we can do in our immediate sphere of influence. And that is, we need to say that we are lurching from one crisis to another because we have a mummy, daddy, socialist government. I mean, that's the bottom line for me. And we need to pull ourselves out and make some radical changes.
Oh, totally agree. I see in Europe they try to introduce a farming tax, so that they locked down the autobahn in Germany.
Yeah.
In France, the same thing. They actually boarded up the Parliament House, but you don't see that on the mainstream media.
Oh, of course you don't. And the thing is, we need to encourage people to get on different platforms. I watch mainstream media for 20 minutes in the morning. I turn on the Today Show on Channel 9 for my sins, and I watch that for around about 20 minutes because I need to know what propaganda and lies are being fed to the general population, because you still need to know that. You still need to understand what that narrative is, so you can then go back and go, well, what's that piece of the jigsaw? What are they really saying? I mean, what's actually happening here? And they're trigger points to tell us. So when they talk about youth crime and politicians come on and speak about youth crime in Queensland, for instance, what happens is that you then go, well, this is what they're saying. What's the undercurrent here? What are they really talking about? And they can often be talking about where more money's going, where they're going to launder more money. I mean, that's really what I call it, a giant Ponzi inflationary money laundering scheme. I mean, they've just come out yesterday and told women who are victims of domestic violence that they're going to give these women $5,000. And apparently, if you object to that, you're sticking up for men who are committing domestic violence. Now, I object to it, but I also object to domestic violence. So I've got solutions for domestic violence. I mean, no one's listening to me about it. Well, how about we all listen to ordinary Australians and let's go back and rather than the government, mummy and daddy again going, oh, well, it's actually our problem. Let's give women. And by the way, I don't know where men are in this, because I know plenty of men who are victims of domestic violence, but apparently, we're not allowed to talk about that either. But do we give that $5,000 to a man fleeing a woman who stabbed him in the chest, which, of course, last week I've got a guy that works for me that happened to. So you see, we're preposterous at the moment. So everyone jumps up and down and says, oh, hey, this is a problem. Youth crime's a problem. Oh, hey, domestic violence. Oh, hey, housing. Oh, so what we'll do is we'll give you money. We'll give you money to fix that, because we have nothing else. We have no ability to actually understand, well, why is it occurring? I mean, what's really driving the level of domestic violence and mental health problems in Australia right now? I mean, let's go back to basics, but no one's doing that. just propaganda and we're just platitudes, and I think that's really hurting Australia at the moment.
Totally. Hallelujah, sister. So,
Oh, sorry, I've got for my mental health, I have a beautiful little cavoodle and she's just being a guard dog. We're just sorting that out now. So I've got someone on hand just to put her on the lead because I knew that we're having a little guest today. So yeah, she's just being a nice little dog. I'll put her up later on the screen. That'll help everyone's mental health. Cute little face. Yeah. No, but I mean, I honestly, I think that Australians, it's time to stop being apathetic. It's time to stop sitting back and believing that other people are going to solve our problems. I mean, the silent majority, not only are they waking up, they need to speak up. And I think it's great that people are waking up, but it is very, very important that it's not just you and I and a small group of people speaking out. I think it's really important that the next time you're at an event where you're standing in front of a group of people, test and measure. Start talking about some of these issues. Start trying to make people aware that you care and that you care about the future of the country. And that awakening will keep going and it will grow and it will get faster and faster.
Yeah, totally agree. There's so many, you brought up so many issues. I don't know which one to take on. For me, like, I actually went out with a young lady that she was part of a women's shelter and she was actually training there. Yeah. And so, to go and see her at work, I had to ring ahead. They'd have to, I'd have to go through the back entrance and I couldn't, go through the main area. I could only stay in the office. Only stay in the office.
Yeah.
But see, because I was learning about healthcare at the time, and also because I also worked in a hospital at the time as a security officer, so I understood. I got it. Because I also saw it in the hospital. I saw the outcomes of that domestic violence, and you are right. I saw it both ways. I must admit the percentages were more women, but I did see it both ways.
Well, that's because men don't report it. Men aren't going to go to the police and report it because, I mean, it's too emasculating and it's too hurtful for them on a range of different levels. I mean, the men that I know,
they don't take it seriously either.
No, well, I mean, the police, you can imagine the police turning up to a domestic dispute and, the man's injured and this has actually happened. And the woman just said, oh, well, I'm sorry, that was just self-defense. It was self-defense. Yeah. And, But what we've got to do is we've got to get to the point where we actually understand why people in a so-called free and democratic and prosperous nation are struggling with their mental health, are struggling with their anger, are struggling with keeping a roof over their head, are struggling with the healthcare dynamic here. I mean, let's face it: if you're a father and you take your child to an emergency ward because they've broken their arm. I mean, in Australia, or in Queensland, at least in Brisbane and the Gold Coast, you and I both know you'll sit there for 6 or 7 hours.
Oh, easy.
And you can imagine being the parent. And I've been in that situation. Any parent who's had to deal with the public healthcare system in Australia. I mean, look, we've got private healthcare, but there are just some things where emergency is an emergency, and unfortunately, if your closest hospital happens to be a public hospital, you're going in, and even in the private system, you'll sit there forever. And you go, well, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, I pay my taxes, I supposedly live in a Western country, and I'm getting angsty and I'm getting angry, and I'm starting to lose my patience after 4 hours and then 5 hours. And you see, we're creating the environment at the moment in Australia where, try to ring up and deal with your national telephone provider like Telstra. Have a crack at talking to them, or your power provider. So if I've got to call my telephone company, if I've got to call Telstra, I look at my diary and I set aside an hour. I do. I haven't had to do it very often, but when I have had to do it, it's horrendous. It's a terrible experience. If I'm going into the bank, for instance, and I'm trying to, say, withdraw cash, or I'm trying to deposit cash, I mean, just try doing that at the moment.
Yeah.
Any little thing that you try to do in society at the moment is difficult, and it's being made more and more difficult by greater and bigger government overreach. And in amongst all of that, you have people out there in the world who are trying to make ends meet, keep a roof over their head, put food on the table for their kids. And yet their power bill goes up by 100%. So, you know, let's take the average man in Australia, and he comes home from a hard day's work, sits down, you know, a full-time mum looking after 2 or 3 kids. She's exhausted, done the school run, putting food on the table. They sit down and have a conversation. And the first thing that she says to him is, mate, I got the electricity bill in yesterday and it's gone up 100% from last year. Now, what's the reaction in that house? How does that household deal with that? Because all of a sudden little Billy or Johnny needs a new pair of sports shoes, which are $200 these days. Then little Mary needs to, because she's a pianist, so they need to pay for the extra lessons at school. So all of a sudden you've got these people sitting in these houses in Australia around the table trying to talk about how they're going to deal with inflation, high interest rates and cost of living and energy prices. And then we ask ourselves, why are men so angry? Why are the fuses blowing? Why is there domestic violence? Now, I'm not excusing violence. And when I tried to raise this the other day on my feed, I listed some of the things that we need to fix to deal with domestic violence and mental health. Someone's like, oh, but you're making excuses. It's like, they're not excuses. They're called reasons. They're called causes. They're things that are triggering people, and people are getting to a point, particularly in some Western countries, where they're just not quite sure where to go next, and they're getting depressed. And the other good thing that we can't talk about, which is why I wrote the book, You Can't Say That, is if you're a white heterosexual man in a Western country right now, you are the most marginalized and hated section of the community at the moment, and you cop it all the time. You cop it through institutions, you cop it through the media, you cop it through social commentary. And to be really honest, hating men and hating specific demographics are also not helping, and I believe they're contributing to the problem. So you see, we've got to strip away the political correctness, and we've got to go down to the heart of the things that people just don't want to talk about anymore. But I think if we start talking about them, we're going to say, well, listen, hey, there's a lot of white men out there, straight white men, that work really, really hard in our society to provide for their families. And you know what? Let's have a go at praising those people. Let's have a go at actually seeing what men actually do in society, rather than, okay, domestic violence figures are going up. 28 women have been killed this year alone through domestic violence. That's horrendous. Let's stop hating on men, and let's start getting down to the reasons why men are getting triggered and going off the rails. Are we allowed to ask that question? You know?
Yeah, on my podcast you can. What does it say? So that's totally true. It's the same with most Western countries in Europe, and same with the United States and Canada. It's the same thing. White males are basically shunned upon and are the cause of all these issues. But you're right. What's causing them to get it? Well, to escalate their behaviour. They're probably mentally unwell themselves, and pretty good chance they are. And the other thing is, there's a gentleman called Cully Marks. I might have his last name wrong, but he makes this awesome statement. He says this is the healthcare system in the Western world. He says the fish tank, if it's dirty, you clean the tank, right? You don't drug the fish.
That's exactly right. Absolutely perfect.
And that's what's happening. So if you've got a mental health issue, we talk about it, but we also drug you. That's the way it is now.
That's exactly right. And the irony with what we're talking about is that mental health is now talked about everywhere. Like, you can't get away from it. This walk for, we're contributing to mental health. We're doing. I mean, I did a charity walk a couple of years ago. The money that we raised went towards mental health issues beyond blue, and there's charity after charity after charity, and there's all of these fundraisers and fun runs and walks, and because mental health is top of mind, but we're not talking about why. We're just talking about, people are mentally ill and it's so bad, and we can't be afraid to talk about it now, and that's why we talk about it, because we don't want to be afraid to talk about it. Well, I'm happy to have a chitty chat about mental health as long as you come back to me and go, these are the things that are actually causing a deterioration of our value system in Australia, and this is triggering some of the mental health issues that we're seeing. And I can tell you what some of those things are, and we've discussed some of them today. You
said it earlier. The government is the cause. They're the ones that are causing it because of all these factors that you talked about in the table rooms of everyone's household. It's the same old thing. This is the problem. We can't afford this, or we can't afford that, or this has gone up, or we missed out on this because of this problem. It's the same story that's happening over and over in every dining room of every Australian household. And it's so true. You've nailed it. You've hit the nail on the head with that. It's definitely true. And this is why people are getting triggered. This is why the government doesn't care.
Exactly.
Government doesn't care. They're making their money. They're still getting rates out of you. They're still getting kickback in tax on your rent.
The thing is
that they don't miss out.
The government ruined the economy. The successive federal governments have done an appalling job at managing the federal economy. And of course, our state governments are all broke, and they've done a terrible job in managing the education and the healthcare systems, which are failing our children and failing society. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But, people...
The Reserve Bank is a company. Did you know that?
That's right. And we're living in a giant scheme of money laundering anyway. I mean, the amount of tax that people pay for absolutely no result. But it's not just no result. It's less than no result, because that money is actually going to people who are bleeding the system dry, because they jump on the latest government handouts and they create their own businesses, and they, the public service grows, because every single time that you put more mummy and daddy legislation in, you've got to administer it. And then you get corruption, and then you get wastage, and then you get blown out bureaucracy, and then you've still got to pay for that too. So the whole system of the way that we are governed in Australia, and I know this is a big sweeping statement, but that system is causing Australia to break apart socially. And if we don't start to help people understand that and to educate people, and it's not about left wing or right wing. I mean, that stopped being that a decade ago in Australia. It's not about political leanings. It's about ideology and values. I mean, we're beyond left wing and right wing now. This is a problem now that runs so deep that you can't just vote for your party with the cause at any cost anymore. You have to say to yourself, well, look, this is what Liberal and Labor governments have successively done in state and federal politics. Local councils, well, look, let's just put them on the shelf because they're so bad and corrupt at the moment. Most of them broke, so you wouldn't even go there with local government. I still think 3 levels of government's too many, but that's a discussion for another day. But the thing is, at the moment...
They've got an ABN as well. Did you know that?
That's right.
Local councils have an ABN.
Yes, that's exactly right. So do state governments and federal.
Yeah,
the thing is, we're in a system now, we're trapped in a system that is creating the breakage of some of our core values in Australia. And I would go so far as to say that if you want to bring back freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of movement, bodily autonomy, if you want to bring back a truly healthy society in mind, body and spirit, if you want to actually get Australia back on track, to something that reflects freedom and democracy, then you are going to have to crack open the egg and break apart the current system that we're sitting in. And people really, really need to stop looking to mummy and daddy government to solve problems. And we need to break that apart as well. And we need to go back to a system that we looked at in 1901, where it's a small government under a federation, that under common law, that actually says, here's some basic common law rules that we're going to govern you by. And anything over and above that, well, do you know what? You go and make your own destiny and make your own life. And of course, there's going to be rules and regulations on some things. And yes, local government does have a place on some things. Like, let's face it, we do want dogs to be on leashes, and we want our garbage to get picked up. That's a good thing. And, you know, we want our road system to be, our local road system to be good, and we want our federal and state roads to be good. But that's not where they're spending their money. And that's not what trough they're sticking their nose in. The governments in Australia now have turned into totalitarian dictatorships that tell us how to live socially, what we should be looking at, what we should be thinking. And that whole system needs to be broken apart. And until we do that, we're going to continue to go down the yellow brick road, and we're not going to get to the Emerald City. We're going to get to a totalitarian society in the 2030s that is not going to be a very good place for our children and grandchildren to live.
Yes, totally agree. Actually, I think we've done full circle in Australia. What do I mean by that? So actually, the Constitution in 1901 was actually written because England, the Queen at the time, was getting too many complaints, too many letters from the citizens, and that they realised, we've got to change things. Because what happened was, everywhere you went, you had to pay a fee. You had to pay it. So if you wanted to go across the borders, for instance, you had to pay.
Yeah.
But this is not talked about.
Yeah.
And then basically you had that's where the IOU come from. IOU was basically that you had crossed a border and that you needed to pay the government back. And later they called it a tax, but that came much, much later. But yeah, what they would do is, you have to work for me now as a government department, and until you pay your debt off. That's the way they did things back then. So anyway, they got too many complaints, and then they realized, about the 1860s, they realized, we've got to write up a constitution for Australia. They started in 1870, and that they were worried. They were worried that it wasn't going to get put through, but the Queen said, yes, this is great. We'll put this through. And so it took 30 years to write, because they'd made so many mistakes with Canada and India, obviously, previously, and South Africa. So and if you actually read the Constitution, it gives us the power. We have the power, and that's what's happening now. The same thing is happening. You've got to have a license to drive somewhere. You never had to have a license once the Constitution was introduced. You never had to have registration for your vehicle. There was no such thing as registration. You know, even to have your horse and cart, there was no fees. You didn't have to pay for any of these transfer fees. There was no such thing as rates. It was null and void. It actually says it in the Constitution that they can't be charged, that we have the free will to travel where we want, and to, as long as we contractually do the right thing, we can own land wherever we want as well.
That's right.
And now,
and
it's still been taken away from us again.
Yeah, that's right. And it's very, very impressive how much history you know. And, you know, I would say that 95% of Australians probably wouldn't understand that history that you talked about and the nuances around that. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is our education system. So don't even get me started on that. But I think one of the things that... Yes. But it's very impressive.
I totally agree.
It's very, very good. And what I always have said to people, and I said it in 2020 till I was blue in the face, it's like I don't know how many laws we're breaking in Australia right now, but it would probably be up to 10 laws. I mean, when I listened to lawyers and I was watching videos and listening to podcasts, I mean, lawyers were coming out, and constitutional lawyers were coming out. One in particular, I can't remember his name now, but I did write it down a few years ago, 4 years ago now, because he was talking about it about 4 years ago. And he said, you can't lock citizens away. You can't do that. And the police force can't be an arm of the government to enforce rules that haven't been legislatively passed through a parliament, because that's not the act that they sit under. And Privacy Act and the look, I could go on, Discrimination Act, the Privacy Act. I mean, how many laws were broken in 2020 to 2022? I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it was quite a lot. The freedom to move between states. I mean, what constitutional part of the Constitution did we break then when we decided to arbitrarily put police on borders and then arrest people and fine people? I'm sorry, which country were we? The fact is that it wasn't till late 2021 that Australians really stood up and said no more. Not really. And people still ran out and decided that they were happy to follow a mandate. It wasn't a law, it was a mandate. And right. I took the time to even look up, what does mandate mean? Like, what does the term mandate actually, what's the definition of a mandate? I mean, it took me 3 seconds to quickly understand from a legal perspective, what's the difference between a mandate, a rule, and a law, and what can be enforced. It's a 5-minute exercise, but we had this propaganda machine brainwashing people into saying that, once again, I go back to where we started from in this podcast, fear and transfer of wealth. Now, the first thing was you scared people into believing that they were going to, and they did lose their jobs. Well, now it's coming out. It's coming out in the court system now that was against the law as well. I mean, sacking someone because of their medical status was obviously against the law. So I don't know how many laws that broke. Anti-discrimination, Privacy Act. There's probably a few others sitting in there. But at the end of the day, when it all boiled down to it, other people sat back and watched these people lose their jobs without saying anything. And I mean, that's the heartache. That was the heartache of Australia, that people went ahead and they went and got an experimental substance put into their arms because they were afraid. They were afraid they were going to lose their jobs, not put food on the table. I mean, we talk about mental health issues. What about the stress of the people that were sitting in that chair and got something put into their arms that they knew was dangerous, because they'd held off because all through 2021 they could see the reactions and they could see the news reports coming out. So they said no, and then suddenly they had a choice to make. Could you imagine? I was so lucky I wasn't sitting in that position, but they had a choice. And could you imagine them going to the doctor and sitting in that chair and watching that needle put that injection in their arm? Imagine how they felt. And we talk about mental health issues. We talk about how people are coping right now because they were forced to do something. And then by July 2022, it was all over. People were getting their jobs back. It turned out they didn't need to do it. I mean, once again, here we are. It was preposterous. It was unfair. It was against the law. It was tyranny. It was coercion, bullying. I don't know, like it's shameful. Like but this is where we're now waking up.
Yes.
And we'll never want that to happen again. Because it does go back to the law. And now that that's happened to us, we all need to stand by and go, is this system of government, is this legal system really the best for us? And the answer to that is a resounding no. It is not. Not only did it introduce tyranny, but it also introduced a standard of living right now in Australia that's deteriorating. So that's where we're at.
Yes. Yeah, and you are right. The biggest fear that everyone has is around money. So that the elites obviously realise that if we can coerce them via money, then a lot of people will do as we say. And you are right. That's what happened. I've never ever in my whole medical career, I've never, like, I've been studying Chinese medicine for 25 years, close to, and I've never ever heard, never even read about where they actually used a lottery prize to get people to go and get the injections. No, I've never ever heard of that before. Please, someone tell me if I'm wrong, but I've never ever heard of that before. That was a first in history.
We entered
coercing people.
into a very, very, very dangerous new world. We stepped into a zone where we had the government taking away our bodily autonomy en masse. But the worst part about it was many people complied and decided that it was actually okay for the government to do that. Many people.
Yeah, there's another fact that they don't talk about, which I haven't heard about, is, and I know a lot of nurses. I've treated a lot of nurses, and they all say the same thing. Yeah, 1/3 of my colleagues withdrew, they resigned, or they got sacked. And that's why there was a huge shortage of employees in Queensland Health.
Absolutely. And they will deny, and anyone that I know in the medical industry that was for the vaccines and for the whole thing will deny that figure. And I said, well, I don't know. I've got a couple of nurses that say it was 30%. It was 1/3 of the workforce, because they watched the reactions. Because when they were putting it into people's arms, they could see in some cases immediate reactions.
It's not hard to figure out. If you've got 18 people in your ward that work there, and now all of a sudden there's 12.
And also you sack people, then not only do they withdraw, then you sack the rest of them. I mean, you've got a healthcare crisis. You've got a staffing crisis, which there was a crisis before that. So what you've done is you've taken a crisis and you've just turned it into a complete nightmare. And of course, on the Gold Coast, we had the preposterous situation where, when people were coming out of operations and they'd been recovering for a couple of days, their final recovery was at SeaWorld Nara Resort because there weren't enough beds in the hospital. There weren't enough people to take care of people. There weren't enough doctors. So, suddenly we're like, well, we need to get them out of here. And they can go into post-op and they can go here. And I don't know what they did about looking after them or staffing. That made national news, and I think that stopped pretty quickly after that. I don't know what the status of that is now, but it made headline news. The Gold Coast was making headline news. That's the bottom line. It's like, oh, okay, well, we don't have enough beds here because we've got a crisis going on in bed space, in number of healthcare workers, in the number of ambulances, because of course, we have got a layer of vaccine injuries that have come over the top of normal healthcare issues, and that can't be denied. The evidence is there. So not only do we have less staff, we've got more patients. So it's created and not enough beds. So we've got this whole thing all coming together that is now settled into a place of just the healthcare system's broken. That's pretty much where the dust has settled. So, and you can say that about anything.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that it doesn't stop there. It goes across the board. There's so many issues in our society.
But I think to get your head around it, that's why I go right up to the top and go, let's take a look at our system and decide whether this is the right thing for us going forward. And I just don't think it is. I don't think we can continue down this path. Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing is you look at the board members of whatever department you're looking at, you realize, and then you start to analyze who these people are.
Yeah.
And you find out what they've done in the past, and you start to research that. You realize, oh, okay, we've got a problem. Houston, we've got a problem.
Exactly. There's a lot of people that nurture the system that feather their nests. I mean, there's a lot of people that still made a lot of money in the last few years. And a lot of the pigs at the trough are actually consultants that take a new government program, and because there's not enough public service, they go, oh, look, for $360 an hour, we'll go out and implement that for you. We'll go out and deal with this. And that's why things are so outrageously expensive, because there are a group of people in Australia that, I mean, I'm in the wrong job. I need to become a government consultant, because guess what? I'll
Yes,
help
I
you
know.
administer
Yeah.
that stuff for the NDIS. Well, how about I go in and I help talk to people about what their needs are and help people fill out forms, and you can give me an hourly rate for that because you've made it so ridiculous and so complex because of all the fraud that now you actually need people. The government pays people to help people to get the benefit. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So the system, it's an integrated living organism right now that's taking Australia down a path of despair. And if we want to go back to health, it does impact people's mental health, and it does
Oh, yeah.
impact people's physical and spiritual health. It does. And I think that if we don't have some honest conversations,
Yeah.
um,
It's never going to get
yeah,
resolved. It will never ever
we
get
won't.
resolved.
And then we'll keep talking about it and go,
Yeah.
well, we've had another, we've had another horrific incident down at like what happened at Bondi. I mean, it's almost like, I'm sorry, what country, what country are we in? This is so devastating. It's so sad, and we've just got to start asking these tough questions.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I'll go back to. So tell us about your companies. Tell us about the businesses that you have.
Oh, well, I
Just,
have a
just
I just have I have a tire mechanical business. We've got some property management businesses, and I also have a property development business. And I have turned my book into a business now. And yeah, just a few bits and pieces in the rural sector. So we have water and cattle, and yeah, we're quite busy actually. There's a lot going
oh, you
on.
would be. You would be.
Yeah,
They've-
yeah.
I grew up on a station for a while at a dairy farm, actually, so I understand. It's a lot of hard
Yeah.
work. It's every
It
day. It's
is, but
monotonous.
I've got a beautiful group of people that work with me. They're like my family, and I'm very fortunate to have some wonderful people in my life. So that gives me the breathing space to be able to undertake this project of writing the book, launching it, and meeting amazing people such as yourself. And that's probably the best outcome that I've had, is that I've been exposed to a lot of really brilliant, like-minded people that are doing some great work in the community and waking people up. And that's what we've got to do.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, just tell us quickly, who's your ideal client? Who is your ideal avatar?
Well, I suppose my ideal client is someone who is open-minded, brave, courageous, and someone who is prepared to have the courage of their convictions and start to speak out, live the life that they've always wanted to live, and be prepared to take some risks and some chances, and be a risk reward person. Have a vision, have a dream, and want to leave the place better than when they arrived. I think that for me is a person that I'd love to work with.
Leave a positive legacy. I get it. So, and
Yeah.
we'll just go on to the last question because, geez, we can talk. I love it. I think we should continue this, but at a later date, Melinda. Is that yeah? I've enjoyed myself for the last 53 minutes, so thank you so much. And I'll just go into the last question. So, what rules or ideas would you go by to attain lifelong longevity?
I think the thing to do for longevity is to, first of all, don't take life too seriously. That's been a big challenge for me in the last few years, but I'm getting back to my humor, and I'm going back to that. I think having a sense of humor and having a really fun, happy attitude in life is a very important part of longevity. Obviously, what you put into your body, that goes without saying. I have my vices. I don't think giving up your vices altogether is the secret to happiness. I do have vices, and I think we all need a few little treats and a few little things that aren't that great for us occasionally. But overall, 80-20 rule or 90-10, let's put some good things into our body. And, I think finding who you are and not being afraid. If you can lose the fear in life, and that's the fear of anything. I mean, most of us make our decisions based on fear, but if you can lose a lot of your fear and be more happy and relaxed and just speak your mind and go back to your core values and free yourself of fear. I think that, that would also be linked to longevity as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Melinda. Much appreciated. As I said, it was very short notice. And thanks, Eldwin, as well. Eldwin Alternate, she hooked us up. So much appreciated.
Yes, I know. Thank you, old one. Yeah, no, I've had a really fun time. It's been so fantastic to talk to you today. It's always great to talk to like-minded people and find the ones that you can connect with. That's another secret to longevity too.
Yeah, true. All right, you've been watching the Get Busy Livin podcast with the lovely Melinda Richards. Thank you so much. And what's the name of your book again?
It's called You Can't Say That. And it's the demise of free thought in Australia, and melindarichards.com. It's just my name.com. And you can jump on there and see some of my media, and you can write to me directly through the email there, through Contact Me. I love hearing from everybody. And you can buy the book. It's an ebook. It's also, I did it in Audible as well, an audio book. Oh my goodness, that was a challenge, but it is in audio as well. So thanks for letting me talk about my book.
Yeah, appreciate it. So this is about your business. So on my 3 platforms, I'll get my VA to give you those links, and your support staff obviously will advertise that. And as I said, just put your details up on those 3 platforms of mine, and we'll advertise the hell out of this book. And also,
well, thank you so much. I do have testimonials on my website too. So they're all real testimonials, and they're all from people that have read the book. So you can get an idea of what people are saying.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Melinda.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
See you guys.